Hello everyone. Here we are. We finally get to finish the second book of Chronicles. And the reason I'm so happy is because this is very much like driving through Oregon and having pine tree fever by the time you finally get into California or Washington, or maybe it's akin to driving through both of the Carolinas, north and south, because it's just been 4 books of, obviously much the same thing, because we went through Kings and then Chronicles pretty much gave us a few extra details, which was nice, but it's been a little tedious. So we're out of here tonight, and tomorrow we'll go into Ezra, and after that we go to Nehemiah, and Nehemiah is a story, and after that we go into Esther, which is a fantastic story. Nehemiah is also. So we're going to get back into stories pretty soon. We're going to be done with chronicling history and, the book of Kings. We finished that, etc., etc. So here we go. 2 Chronicles 34. Josiah, remember, they made Josiah king after Amon was murdered. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord and followed the ways of his father David, and you remember David is the father of all of them, not turning aside to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. In his 12th year, so he was 16 when he started to seek God. Good age. Teenage years are a good time to seek God. In his 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, so he was 20 at that time. Asherah poles and idols, so all gone. Under his direction, the altars of the Baals were torn down. He cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them and smashed the Asherah poles and the idols. You notice how this goes back and forth? Good king, bad king, good king, bad king, bad king, bad king, good king. Interesting. All right. These he broke to pieces and scattered over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. Appropriate. He burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and so he purged Judah and Jerusalem. So he took the evil priests, who were the priests of these false gods, and he burned their bones on their altars. So he was making a statement here. In the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and in the ruins around them, he tore down the altars and the Asherah poles and crushed the idols to powder and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout Israel. And we remember this story. It was pretty intense. Then he went back to Jerusalem. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land, so this would be 6 years beyond, so he's 26 now, to purify the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, and Messiah, the ruler of the city, with Joah, son of Jehoahaz, the recorder, to repair the temple of the Lord his God. They went to Hilkiah, the high priest, and gave him the money that had been brought into the temple of God, which the Levites, who were the gatekeepers, had collected from the people of Manasseh, Ephraim, and the entire remnant of Israel, and from all the people of Judah and Benjamin and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Then they entrusted it to the men appointed to supervise the work on the Lord's temple. These men paid the workers who repaired and restored the temple. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to purchase dressed stone and timber for joists and beams for the buildings that the king of Judah had allowed to fall into, or the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin, okay, the bad kings of Judah. The workers labored faithfully. Over them to direct them were Jahath and Obadiah, Levites descended from Merari. Isn't it neat the way we're recognizing names now? And Zechariah and Meshullam descended from Kohath. The Levites, all who were skilled in playing musical instruments, had charge of the laborers and supervised all the workers from job to job. Some of the Levites were secretaries, scribes, and gatekeepers. While they were bringing out the money that had been taken into the temple of the Lord, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law of the Lord that had been given through Moses. Hilkiah said to Shaphan the secretary, "I found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord." He gave it to Shaphan. Then Shaphan took the book to the king and reported to him, "Your officials are doing everything that's been committed to them. They've paid out the money that was in the temple of the Lord and have entrusted it to the supervisors and workers." Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book." And Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the law, he tore his robes. He gave these orders to Hilkiah: Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Abdon, son of Micah, Shaphan the secretary, and Isaiah, the king's attendant. "Go and inquire of the Lord for me and for the remnant in Israel and Judah about what's written in this book that's been found. Great is the Lord's anger that's poured out on us because those who've gone before us have not kept the word of the Lord. They've not acted in accordance with all that's written in this book." Can you imagine how you'd feel? Hilkiah and those the king had sent with him went to speak to the prophet Huldah, who was the wife of Shallum, son of Tokath, the son of Hazra, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the new quarter. She said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me, this is what the Lord says. I'm going to bring disaster on this place and its people. All the curses written in the book that's been read in the presence of the king of Judah." Remember all of the things the Lord said would happen if the people forsook him? So he's telling Huldah, you tell the king, I'm bringing all that stuff to pass. Because they have, all curse that has been read, because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods and aroused my anger by all that their hands have made, my anger will be poured out on this place and will not be quenched. Tell the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says concerning the words you heard. Because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before God when you heard what he spoke against this place and its people. And because you humbled yourself before me and tore your robes and wept in my presence, I have heard you, declares the Lord. Can you imagine? The Lord is on his throne up in the heavens, but he hears us. You know, just recently I had cause to realize that the Lord had acted on my behalf in a small matter that was important. And I thought, amazing, you are enthroned high in the heavens, yet you look down upon me and you see the things that I'm going through and that I need, and you're working everything out and helping me. It's really stunning, people. He's closer than our breath in reality. All right. Because you humbled yourself before me and tore your robes and wept in my presence, I have heard you, declares the Lord. Now I will gather you to your ancestors and you will be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I'm going to bring on this place and on those who live here. So they took her answer back to the king. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the Levites, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. So he was reading the first 5 books of the Bible, okay? You know, reading all the things the Lord took them through and the promises that were made to them and the results if they fell away. The king stood by his pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, and to obey the words of the covenant written in this book. This is how we are to be, people. This is how we're to be. We are to be so faithful in front of this good God. Then he had everyone in Jerusalem and Benjamin pledge themselves to it. The people of Jerusalem did this in accordance with the covenant of God, the God of their ancestors. Now remember, this is hundreds of years forward, okay? So, they're looking back and going, oh my God, what have we done? We haven't done any of this stuff. Josiah removed all the detestable idols from all the territory belonging to the Israelites, and he had all who were present in Israel serve the Lord their God. As long as he lived, they did not fail to follow the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Josiah celebrated the Passover to the Lord in Jerusalem, and the Passover lamb was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month, because now they've got the book. They know the whole story now, the Passover lamb and the plagues of Egypt and all of this stuff. So now they're like, we can do this. So the Passover lamb was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month. Remember, the months are different. They're not our calendar. He appointed the priests to their duties and encouraged them in the service of the Lord's temple. He said to the Levites, who instructed all Israel and who had been consecrated to the Lord, put the sacred ark in the temple that Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, built. It is not to be carried about on your shoulders. Now serve the Lord your God and his people Israel. Prepare yourselves by families in your divisions according to the instructions written by David, king of Israel, and by his son Solomon. So now he's talking about the ark that has the stone tablets in it that Moses took from Sinai, okay? Stand in the holy place with a group of Levites for each subdivision of the families of your fellow Israelites, the lay people. Slaughter the Passover lambs, consecrate yourselves, and prepare the lambs for your fellow Israelites, doing what the Lord commanded through Moses. Josiah provided for all the lay people who were there a total of 30,000 lambs and goats for the Passover offerings, and also 3,000 cattle, all from the king's own possessions. That's awesome. His officials also contributed voluntarily to the people and the priests and Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, the officials in charge of God's temple, gave the priests 2,600 Passover offerings and 300 cattle. Also, Conaniah, along with Shemaiah and Nethanel, his brothers, and Hashabiah, Jael, and Jozabad, the leaders of the Levites, provided 5,000 Passover offerings and 500 head of cattle for the Levites. The service was arranged, and the priests stood in their places with the Levites in their divisions, as the king had ordered. The Passover lambs were slaughtered, and the priests splashed against the altar the blood handed to them, while the Levites skinned the animals. They set aside the burnt offerings to give them to the subdivisions of the families of the people to offer to the Lord, as it's written in the book of Moses. They did the same with the cattle. They roasted the Passover animals over the fire as prescribed. Remember, all of that was taught to us. We were told exactly how to do everything. If you remember back in the first 5 books, Numbers and Deuteronomy, we were taught, okay? And boiled the holy offerings in pots, cauldrons, and pans, and served them quickly to all the people. After this, they made preparations for themselves. Just imagine this. This must have been so much fun. After this, they made preparations for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fat portions until nightfall. So the Levites made preparations for themselves and for the Aaronic priests, Aaronic being Aaron-ic, Aaronic, for the priests in the line of Aaron. The musicians, the descendants of Asaph, were in the places prescribed by David, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, the king's seer. The gatekeepers at each gate did not need to leave their posts because their fellow Levites made the preparations for them. Now, when you hear the name Asaph, and I told you he's going to be in Psalms because he writes some of the music that's in Psalms. Remember, he was in the time of David, and David, the Psalms are David and what he wrote musically, okay? So we're past that now. David is dead, and we're way past all of that, okay? But we're going to come back to it, and that's the beauty of the Bible, is it doesn't leave a thing out, okay? We're going to see the songs that David wrote, and Asaph's songs are going to be in there too. So at that time, the entire service of the Lord was carried out for the celebration of the Passover and the offering of burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord, as King Josiah had ordered. The Israelites who were present celebrated the Passover at that time and observed the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days. The Passover had not been observed like this in Israel since the days of the prophet Samuel. And not so even when Hezekiah did the Passover, it must have not been as true to form as it is here, because they had the book that explained how to do it. And none of the kings of Israel had ever celebrated such a Passover as did Josiah, which is exactly what I said, with the priests, the Levites, and all Judah and Israel who were there with the people of Jerusalem. This Passover was celebrated in the 18th year of Josiah's reign, so that would be when he was 26. After all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, N-E-C-H-O, king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish. Let me see if I have that right. Carchemish, C-A-R-C-H-E-M-I-S-H. Let's read that again. After all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates. And Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. But Necho sent, now see, every time you see Necho wafers, even though it's spelled differently, you can think, hey, there used to be a king of Egypt named Necho. You know, it's the little things, people. But Necho sent messengers to him saying, what quarrel is there, king of Judah, between you and me? It's not you I'm attacking at this time, but the house with which I'm at war. God has told me to hurry, so stop opposing God who's with me, or he'll destroy you. Josiah, however, would not turn away from him, but disguised himself to engage him in battle. He wouldn't listen to what Necho had said at God's command, but went to fight him on the plain of Megiddo. Now, Megiddo is going to be where Armageddon is going to be fought in the very end, okay, very end, Revelation times, New Testament. Archers shot King Josiah, and he told his officers, take me away, I'm badly wounded. So they took him out of his chariot, put him in his other chariot, and brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. He was buried in the tombs of his ancestors, and all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for him. Jeremiah composed laments, L-A-M-E-N-T-S, like lament, lamenting over something. So Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah, and to this day, all the male and female singers commemorate Josiah in the laments. That's something we didn't learn in the book of Kings. These became a tradition in Israel and are written in the laments, which would be the book of Lamentations, which we will read. The other events of Josiah's reign and his acts of devotion in accordance with what is written in the law of the Lord, all the events from beginning to end are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah, which we have read already. And the people in the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and made him king in Jerusalem in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. The king of Egypt dethroned him in Jerusalem and imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents. So Egypt has conquered them now here. 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. The king of Egypt made Eliakim, a brother of Jehoahaz, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Eliakim's brother Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt. So Jehoahaz was the king, but Necho changed all that. He came in defeated them and set up a whole different king to watch over the territory he's just conquered, Jerusalem and Judah. They were Jews, but still, he took Jehoahaz with him to Egypt and changed his, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. Okay, but Necho took Eliakim's brother, Jehoahaz, and carried him off to Egypt. So there were two brothers. He changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim, and he made him king over Judah and Jerusalem, but he took the other brother, who was Jehoahaz, and carried him off to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked him and bound him with bronze shackles to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took to Babylon articles from the temple of the Lord and put them in his temple there. The other events of Jehoiakim's reign, the detestable things he did, and all that was found against him are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin, his son, succeeded him as king. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months and 10 days. 3 months and 10 days. 3 1/3 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. In the spring, King Nebuchadnezzar sent for him and brought him to Babylon together with articles of value from the temple of the Lord, and he made Jehoiachin's uncle Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God and didn't humble himself before Jeremiah, the prophet, who we will hear from, who spoke the word of the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him take an oath in God's name. So when we get into the major prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah, I'm going to read up so I can set it up for you so you know. So remember, do your best to be familiar with these kings' names because you will hear them again, okay? Because we want to know who Jeremiah is prophesying to, who Isaiah is prophesying to, okay? So anyway, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, didn't humble, so who spoke the word of the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar. This is Zedekiah now, who had made him take an oath in God's name. He became stiff-necked and hardened his heart and would not turn to the Lord, the God of Israel. Furthermore, all the leaders of the priests and the people became more and more unfaithful. You're only as good as your leader, people. Following all the detestable practices of the nations and defiling the temple of the Lord, which he had consecrated in Jerusalem. The Lord, the God of their ancestors, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place, which is the temple in Jerusalem. But they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of the Lord was aroused against his people and there was no remedy. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and did not spare young men or young women, the elderly or the infirm. God gave them all into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. He carried to Babylon all the articles from the temple of God, both large and small, and the treasures of the Lord's temple and the treasures of the king and his officials. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything of value there. He carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his successors until the kingdom of Persia came to power. The land enjoyed in Persia, we know now, is Iran. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests. All the time of its desolation it rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, and we will hear that prophecy. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, The Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he's appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up, and may the Lord their God be with them. Wow. Praise be to Cyrus. I believe it was Cyrus or Darius we did not even believe existed until archaeologists found a stone with a proclamation on it it was either Cyrus or Darius, one of the two of them. We didn't even think, there was a lot of time, folks, where people read the Bible and thought, what? And archaeology has proved all of it at this point. So I love you. We are out of here and we are on to Ezra. Chapter 1, there's only 10 chapters in that book. He is a minor prophet. And then we go to Nehemiah, and then we go to the book of Esther. And these are going to be some fantastic stories with lessons in them. I love you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.